You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Welcome back to the Cricket Podcast, where in this part of the show we'll be talking everything India. Their B team is over in Sri Lanka. The women's team is heading to a decider in England. Then we've got Australia in the West Indies. We've got some 100. We can talk about Ashwin. Ashwin, you know, he's Indian. He can be in the India section of the show. And I think we'll wrap up briefly with a quick mention of Ireland's heroics against South Africa at Malahide as they take down a major nation for the first time at home. Max, we'll start, though, with India. I mean, it's not an official India B team, is it? It's the India white ball team heading to Sri Lanka. Hardik Pandya, I think, is the captain. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what's going on there?
I've got Shikhar Dhawan down as the captain, but
Shikhar Dhawan's the captain.
that was from the Indian news site I ripped the squad from, so it may not be true. I don't know.
I think you are right. I've because it's Hardik Pandya's the one who's like, should he have gone to England or not?
Yeah,
obviously
that's if he's not bowling, then absolutely not.
Yeah.
India are taking on Sri Lanka in a limited over series, 3 ODIs and 3 T20s, and that is beginning on the 18th of July. All 6 of those games being played at the in Colombo, and it's been kind of a long time coming. It was obviously delayed for COVID. It was originally going to be in May, and then it was July, then it was August, and now it's happening this year. And it was also initially a 5-match T20 series, and then it was a 3-match T20 series, and then it was a 5-match T20 series, and now it's a 3-match T20 series again. So it's been a bit of a journey, but we're here. We're finally here for India's white ball team against Sri Lanka. And I mean, we can go into the squads in a little bit. I mean, the main thing for India, I think, is there's a couple of guys in there who you might be thinking, could they be in England right now? I'm thinking maybe Dhawan, Shaw, and Bhuvi, and then you got a few of your white ball stalwarts, and then some really exciting T20 talent. On the Sri Lanka side of things, they're doing some funny stuff again. So it's not dissimilar from the side that toured England of the 24 players.
Good. Yeah, you don't want to throw away progress like that, do you?
Yeah, I know. Of the 24 players that were in England, the suspended 3 who were very naughty boys are not considered, and then they've dropped Ashada Fernando and Nuwan Pradeep. But the main news from the Sri Lanka side of things is that Kusal Perera is no longer the captain, having taken over captaincy in May. Dusan Shanaka is now the captain. Could be because
based on what?
Well, he actually
what did he do?
He actually has a 100% record as T20 captain for Sri Lanka, 3 games out of 3. So perhaps that's the reason. No, it's not. It's not the reason. The reason is actually to do with a contract dispute. Apparently, I don't know if this is 100% confirmed, but this is apparently the reason. So the contract dispute is a thing. Which sort of started when Sri Lanka's players were mulling over whether to sign their annual central contracts. They sort of changed things up a bit. This is sort of partly Tom Moody's doing. They'd done some analysis and decided that a better way of doing contracts was to give out lower base salaries and higher performance bonuses. So they were basically getting extra money for beating top teams, which, as we've seen, seems rather unlikely.
It's a really good way of saving money, that, if you're
maybe some of the reasons the players weren't so happy. Who knows? But after there was a bit of like back and forth, a bit of negotiation. Mainly, apparently, the Sri Lanka players were just asking for a reason, just a breakdown of how they'd come to the conclusion of what they were offering. And they finally got that and decided as a group that they were going to accept and sign the contracts. And no sooner had they decided that, halfway through the England series, the Monday after, Sri Lanka decided they were going to withdraw all the contracts and replace them with tour-based contracts for the rest of the year, which didn't go down very well, some people, especially those who won't be getting a contract until they play tests in November. but that's where the kind of issue came in with the captain. So apparently some of them signed those tour contracts immediately, which meant that all the people who were pissed off basically lost all their negotiating power. And word is that Kusal Pereira was one of the people trying to hold out, and Shanaka signed his contract straight away. And there we have it, a new captain. So long story short.
But there's loads wrong with this, isn't there? I mean, like I feel you've got to feel sorry for all the Sri Lanka players that are effectively stuck in the middle of this. I mean, I saw in the original contracts that they circulated, their test captain, Karuna Ratna, was in the C category, which is absolutely ludicrous when you consider he's one of the few.
Yeah, it was Diquela and Dhananjaya De Silva were the only two in the A category.
Yeah, so that's a problem. Two, this is a problem, but there's a wider problem in cricket here. I mean, it's cricket is a rich sport. There's not really another way around that. You've got some mega domestic leagues. You've got some powerhouse international teams that have a colossal broadcasting deals. It should be incumbent on India, England, and probably to a lesser extent Australia, but also Australia to play a role in making it financially sustainable. I mean, there are other problems. I mean, like if you did just give the Sri Lanka board a load of money, they'd probably keep it all, because that's not a particularly transparent, well-run board. If we're being honest either, but you do have to think that there's, I don't know, maybe there's a role for the ICC in terms of guaranteeing minimum salaries for players in the elite international
I mean, as ever, we've got big structural questions, haven't we, about the governance of cricket? But we can leave those for another day. The short story is that Sri Lanka are in disarray, and surely they've got absolutely no chance, right?
No. They don't. Dan, I mean, I don't know if there's any hope for them.
Okay, so first of all, the contractual dispute is an interesting one, because I think one of the reasons why there's an issue is the fact that these players are being graded somehow in terms of various metrics, and then given X salary based on the outcome of that grading system. But I don't think the players are actually privy to what they're being graded on, or how they're being graded, or what metrics they're being assessed on, and I think that's a bit of a problem, because if you're in a contractual negotiation with a player, you can't, like, just say for sake of argument, you're trying to renew a player's contract in county cricket, right? You can't just turn around to them and say, we're going to give you this because of some like random reasons, and
because the algorithm said so.
There's certain targets that if you hit them, we'll give you a pay rise or a bonus. But we're not going to tell you those targets. Like, you can't do that. But you have to know, players might get like bonused on hitting 1,000 runs in red ball cricket or whatever, and that's completely transparent. Whereas I don't think this is transparent, and I can understand why there's an issue there.
Yeah. I mean, that was the big problem at the start, sort of the lack of transparency. And I think that what really rubbed the salt in the wound, that was once they finally got the transparency they asked for, which was like an actual breakdown of how they calculated everything, and they said, okay, fine, we'll sign. They took the contracts away.
And with regards to their chances against India B, I think the Sri Lanka that I saw against England, I think they'd struggled against most side Mushtaq Ali Trophy teams, let alone India B team.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sad reality, isn't it? Max, in that India team, there is, as you said, some exciting talent. Who are you most looking forward to seeing or hearing about? I don't know. I don't even know if these matches have been broadcast in the UK, to be honest. I'd assume they are, because they're India games.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned that there's a few well-known names in there, so we can discount them because we've seen them play before. There's a few guys that recently broke into the India white ball side in that England series, which we were delighted to finally see. And that I'm thinking Sky and Ishan Kishan in particular. I'm really looking forward to seeing Padakal, because I think he is mustard, and we've seen that in the IPL, and he's just great, and it's really, really good that he's got this opportunity to show that for the Indian side.
I'm interested in a couple of players as well who actually aren't in the official squad. they're down as net bowlers.
Mm.
So
You're going to say Isham Perel?
I am going to say Isham Perel, and I'm also going to say Saika Shaw, who is another player who's got a very good numbers at lower level, but doesn't really get IPL exposure. Now, in these kind of bubble environments, it's not out of the question that these players could actually be catapulted into the team at short notice.
Well, it worked for Washington Sundar, didn't it?
Well, this is what I'm thinking, because could there be a scenario where I've been saying that Isham Perel should be playing for Kings 11 Punjab for over 2 years, yet he ends up making his IPL, his international debut before he makes his IPL debut?
That'd be quite a turn of events. It could happen. Max, should we do some predictions for this series? I will be honest. I am finding it reasonably hard to be excited by it, but you never know, do you? Like, cricket is funny. Maybe something will.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of series where I'm not sure the interest is in the outcome of the games particularly, but like the individual is really putting cricket down to an individual sport. This particular series, and I think there might not be many chances for the Indian players, particularly to break into the T20 World Cup side out of this. I think it's the only 3 T20 internationals they've actually got before the World Cup, and I think the IPL will be the real thing that maybe catapults someone in, but it could give someone a chance to at least put themselves into the thinking of the Indian setup. So I think that's probably where the interest is for me. And the only other thing that maybe I think might be interesting to keep an eye on is if there's one weakness perhaps in the India lineup, it might be the pace bowling, but the squad's got Yuzvendra Chahal, Rahul Chahar, Krunal Pandya, Kuldeep Yadav, Varun Chakravarti. Could we see 20 overs of spin in Sri Lanka in an ODI? What do you reckon?
Yeah, could happen. It could happen. Predictions. Well, was I supposed to give a prediction, Max?
Yes, go on, give us a prediction. Or should we just quickly all say 6-0 and get on with
India are going to win every single game.
Yeah.
And I don't think there will be a single close match.
I reckon one game's going to get rained off, so 5.
Dan?
The only thing that's stopping a clean sweep is the rain.
There we are. Let's talk about the India women then. They are in England. This ongoing series, we've followed it most of the way through. It started with that test match that ended in, a good draw. England won the ODIs 2-1, and it came down to the T20s. I think the last time we spoke, we said that England needed to win 2 out of 3, or India needed to win 3 to take a clean victory. And if it was 2-1 to India, the series would be tied. Those T20s so far, in the first one, England won. They set a target of 177 for the Indians. And I think that's probably a bit much for this India team, to be honest. It rained, and that, could have spiced things up. But England took some early wickets, and I think they won by 18 runs on DLS. So it was a pretty comfortable victory from there. In the second game on Sunday, India batted first. They set a target of... This is a weird game. I want to talk a lot about this game because there's some weird stuff happened in this match. In the second, India batted first, and they set a target of 148 for the loss of just 4 wickets. Which, correct me if I'm wrong here, Dan. That's a weird score for a T20. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know you've been doing some work about different benchmarks in the women's game versus the men's game. Is 148 for 4? For me, if you score 148, you should be 8 down. Yeah. If you're 4 down, you should be up in the 170s, 180s probably.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. I mean, it's not the 148 that's the problem. It's the 4-4 because it suggests that you haven't maximised your resources correctly or efficiently. Now, Deepti Sharma, 24 of 27 balls, probably a good illustration. Actually, only hit 1 boundary in 27 balls. Now, that would be a good example of someone who maybe didn't kick on as was required in the match situation. So yeah. Like I say, it's just you've got to maximise those resources as efficiently as you can. Being 148 for 4 suggests you maybe left 20 or 30 out there.
Yeah. Just another question on that before we talk about the England reply. I know you've been doing some sort of work on the women's game. If we look at boundary, we talk about boundary percentage on this show quite a lot for the men's game. We say 18%, so a pretty good. Or an average boundary percentage. Is the women's game similar at the T20 level in that that kind of power, if you like, is required, or less so?
No, absolutely, yeah. You still need to hit boundaries, and actually, there are some pretty strong boundary hitters in the women's game. There are players around or approaching 20%. The benchmarks are a little bit lower, but about 3% lower. So you're looking about sort of 17-ish is about average broadly for 16.5, 17 for men, about 14 for women's, and there's players who can do much more than the 14% as well. So yeah, it is certainly still a very prevalent metric for dominating, working out who's going to win the match.
Cool. So that, yeah, I think that in my mind that confirms that my initial look at that 148 for 4 was probably a poor score. Anyway, England chasing it. They were cruising along. They needed 43 or 40 balls with 8 wickets in hand, and they blew it, Max. And there's no other way to get around this, to be honest. They completely bottled this. 4 run-outs in the England innings. They came up 8 runs short. A pretty poor example of a chase, right?
It's You said the word, didn't you? It was a bottle job. I honestly cannot get my head around some of it. Sometimes it happens. You just smack the ball to a fielder, and you're like, well, that was annoying. I probably should have placed it better, but it does happen. A bad ball getting a wicket, that kind of thing. But those runouts, 3 of them in particular, were unforgivable. Like there was absolutely no sense to it. I mean, was it the last one that was just involved trotting? Yeah. Maddie Villiers just trotting back to a crease and not realizing that the throw was coming in and being run out. I mean, Heather Knight, you could argue, was a little unfortunate, and it was especially given the timing. It just happened after Tammy Beaumont had fallen, and then what was it, the next ball or a couple of balls later, she ended up nearly falling over Deepti Sharma, who managed to deflect the ball onto the stumps via the instep of her boot whilst diving to stop the ball. So that was a bit of a freak accident. We can maybe forgive her for that one, but the rest were. It wasn't even like a miscommunication. That was the bizarre thing. It was just like bad calling. That was it. It was like bad decisions being made. This
is part of the reason I was asking Dan about boundary percentage, because I was wondering whether I don't watch as much women's cricket, and I haven't watched as much women's cricket as I have watched men's cricket. So the rhythms of I watched an entire IPL, for example. I probably haven't seen as many women's games as I watched the IPL this year. If I'm laying my cards out and being really honest about that, I'm trying to watch more, and I'm trying to understand more about the game, which is why I asked about that boundary percentage thing. Because I was wondering whether you just have to run like a mad person to get a decent score. I just 4 run-outs in an innings, Dan. If you were doing the match report of that, would you highlight that maybe you need to not be so frantic?
Yeah, I mean, 4 run-outs in a T20 match when you lose 8 wickets in 20 overs is so half your dismissals of run-outs is certainly not positive. I can't remember many T20 matches where that's happened. I
had looked into this as well, and this is, you can only really find this data, good data for the men's game. But in the history of men's international T20 cricket, there have been 4 games with 4 run-outs, none with 5. So 4 is the maximum, and this includes like Hong Kong v Oman and stuff like that. It's not necessarily. This is every game,
everything ever.
Yeah, there have been something like 1,600 innings at the internet that are recorded in international T20 cricket. So what's that work out? Like 0.4, 0.5% of the innings ever played at the international level have this number of run-outs in. So a 1 in 200 chance. I feel like if you're chasing 148. That's an unnecessary risk that you've introduced into the game.
I mean, you're looking at 1 a ball. You don't need to push a risky 2, do you?
No, you probably don't even really need to take a quick single. To be honest, I mean, we've heard in the last year. I mean, like, let's take Sanju Samson in that game against in the IPL where he got 100 and nearly won the game. And who was he batting with? The South African fast bowler Morris, and they didn't run. And then at the end of the game, he justified it. And Sanju Samson was saying, "Oh well, I think in the near future we'll actually just not be taking singles sometimes because we'll have better matchups." So if that's how people are thinking about the game at one level, I mean, you almost think that any run out is therefore inexcusable, even in T20 cricket where you've got that pressure. I mean, Dan, I don't know if that's maybe too extreme a view, but it seems preventable.
No, it's singles in T20 cricket are a real point of contention right now, and I think that it's going to be something that the approach towards singles is going to change a lot in the next 5-10 years. I actually think Sanjay Samson, in theory, has a strong argument for certain circumstances. When the matchup is good for the batter, hitting a voluntary single, and I'm talking about just deliberately finding a gap rather than, trying to hit a boundary and then fielder stopping it and then you getting a single, so voluntary single is almost always a bad outcome for that isolated ball if you've got a good matchup. And quick singles in T20 are just basically worthless unless you're deliberately trying to get like a massive matchup on strike. But the vast majority of the time, that's not the case. And we saw that here, and we see it a lot in the IPL and other T20 leagues as well. But brainless running between the wickets is like it does happen a lot. Players, the risk reward for a quick single in T20 cricket really isn't there.
Yeah, well, and this is a really extreme example of what can go wrong if you don't think that through. We should mention in this series as well that Harleen Deal took an awesome catch, didn't she, Max? I'm assuming you've seen that. Yeah, everyone's seen
absolutely.
that.
Everyone's seen that catch. Yeah.
And is that all you got to say? I mean, people have talked about it. It is good. If you haven't seen it, go and find it.
Yeah, go and check it out. I think it's on the BBC website, isn't it? And
one of those classics.
Many other.
Catch it, throw it, dive back into play. I think the dive back into play is really what sells it for me. Yeah. And that run out of Heather Knight, which you've talked about, I've got a bit of a problem with that because I think the bowler celebrates it too much.
No, I forgot to mention that. That was my very first thought of that wicket was the three of them around it that saw it. How are you celebrating that wicket that much? Like you should be well, ashamed. You should be a little embarrassed about the wicket, feel a bit bad, but take it.
I think it's because they just run out Heather Knight and
yeah, it just turned the game.
But it was still.
It's a ball.
Right. The final game is ongoing at the moment. India are 15 for 2 batting first after 4 overs. We'll give an update before the end of the show.
Go on, England.
Yeah. So it looks like England are going to win this. The Google win predictor says 87% England women. And I think probably over the series, on balance, England have been better across the Test, the ODIs, and the T20s. They did, I don't know if we mentioned, they did lose that match we were just talking about by 8 runs. But so this is a decider, the game ongoing at the moment. But looks like England are in a good position after 4 overs. Where do we want to go next? We had someone tweet in, Dick Shit says, what do you think the score, on the last India thing, what do you think the scoreline for India v England in the Test series will be? We'll do an actual preview of this, but just like, we're a few weeks away now. Max, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in white ball mode, so it's tough. But I do fancy India for this one. I have to say, I think it'll be tight. I reckon maybe 2-1 India. Couple of draws in there.
Dan, I think you've answered this before. I think you went for India 2-1 as well, or maybe 3-1.
Yeah, I lean towards India for the Test series. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go 5-0 England then.
Yeah.
Cricket's
coming home.
Sorry?
What about the C team play?
Well, you know what? To be honest,
7-0.
Yeah, 7-0. We forgot to say at the beginning of this segment, like, subscribe, comment, find us on YouTube, find us on patreon.com, the Cricket Pod, and we're sponsored by Woodstock. And let us know what you think the series will be in that. We're going to move away from India now we'll do a quick preview of the Pakistan T20s. England are taking on Pakistan for 2 T20s. Max, did you prepare anything on this or?
No, not really. I think just the main thing for discussion is the squad, isn't it? With the most of the England guys who are in isolation are now back in. So that's, your big boys, a couple of them missing out, assuming they were the people who actually had COVID. Tom Curran's back. You'd be glad to know. We mentioned, didn't we, as well? Tom Curran, Chris Dorden, Jake Ball, all in there, and a couple of guys from the ODI series have maintained a place. So we've got Lewis Gregory and Saki Mahmood still about.
And Parkinson?
And Matt Parkinson, yeah. But whether he'll get to play or not, we'll see, because Adil Rashid is also in the squad. But yeah, I think it's great for Saki Mahmood in particular to be able to hang around. I don't know whether they were intending on having him in the T20 squad aside from the outbreak. I'm guessing not. So that's a good opportunity for him. And I dare say we will see Jake Ball play, because he has actually had quite a good blast so far. He's taken quite a few wickets, so we'll probably get to see him in an England shirt again. I don't know if he's had the best time of it, but maybe he can have a James Vince style renaissance. I just have, as usual, all I have is complaints. And I think the main thing for me is some of the guys who got, there was an 18-man backup squad that they put out for that England-Pakistan series. And if they had a feeling that they were going to bring the big guns back for the T20s, especially once you'd gone 2-0 up, why did you not at least give one of the other guys a go? Like, they didn't change the team for 3 games. Yeah. And we're talking about a backup team. Like, you might as well take the opportunity to learn something. There'll be a couple of guys in there who'll be feeling pretty hard done by the fact that they've just been parachuted out of their county in the middle of a game and just left to watch stuff.
Maybe they wanted to transport the closed shop mentality to the C team.
Well, that's it. Actually, I mean, there's been talk about how brilliant it is that the mindset that was sort of the strategy that Owen Morgan's employed in the England squad has carried down into that C team. The way they approached the game was exactly the same as how England approached the game. So maybe there is something in that, Dan. Maybe you're right.
That subject, I'm a bit loath to give Morgan all this credit for it, actually. And my Max's little chuckle on his face there, I think he may have segged into this on purpose.
No, never.
Maybe it's just because his players are really good. And they saw Kevin Peterson growing up, for example, playing the IPL and when they were younger, and so I quite fancy being like that myself, and then learn how to try and get to that level. I'm not convinced about the influence of captains generally, and I think a lot of the success or failure of captains is a byproduct of the resources that they've got to pick from.
I think there's probably a lot to be said about that. I do think that England do some things better than other teams, though, and
yeah, I think picking someone like Phil Salt to open the batting does sort of it still shows you that that's the kind of thing that they want to go for, doesn't it?
It's a clear they have a clear batting strategy that.
I'm not debating. Yeah, and that was one. Was it the second ODI? And they were lost 2 wickets really quickly, and Salt and Vince still went for it. Whereas I think a lot of teams would go in their shell, and I thought that was so positive in terms of that strategy, 100%.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions on this series. One from Masker 101. If players like Mahmood and Parkinson do well in T20s as well, can they be considered outside picks for the T20 World Cup, or will it be the same squad and players as in the India and Sri Lanka series? I think I think it'd be weird now to take Tom Curran instead of Mahmood. I'm not saying they won't do it, but I think it would be weird. And I don't know how big the squads are. I haven't done my pre-research this far in advance, but unless they're really, really tight, I would have thought Parkinson would be there as your reserve leg spinner, because Rashid's has got a documented
dodgy
shoulder problem. Yeah, if you, I mean, maybe they won't. It would be classic England to be like, oh, we haven't got Liam Livingston's our backup leg spinner, but but I'd have thought they've got a good chance of going. I don't know if you both agree.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I don't know. Again, I don't think they'll maybe get into the first team, but I would fully expect them to be on the plane. I'd
like to think that they would both be on the plane, but England have a habit of disappointing me with their team selection, so that's probably a bad thing for those 2 players.
And Prajwal says, "Is this Pakistan bowling team overrated?" Dan, I don't know if you want to take that one.
I don't think so. I think that the main problem is that they just keep on. They have this flavour of the month, who's usually a player who's really young, and then they just kind of dump them out of the team after a couple of games and then move on to the next one. And that's not a strategy for long-term success. I think in the T20s, we're going to see a lot more from Pakistan in terms of that bowling-orientated approach. And I really like the fact that they can structure up with, say, Fahim Ashraf at 8 and Hassan Ali at 9, which just gives them insane hitting depth as well. And almost makes up for the fact that, Babar Azam and Rizwan at the top might play quite conservatively. I think that I'm actually a little bit unconvinced about Shadab Khan as a top-level leg spinner. And I think that I'm not sure Usman Khadir is there yet either. So I think maybe they lack a top-level leggy. But pace-wise, I think that they're pretty well covered.
Here we are. Next on the docket then is the 5-match T20 series between Australia and the West Indies taking place in the Caribbean. Australia, after 3 games, have already managed to lose this series. They're 3-0 down. And they're not losing by a little bit. They're getting smashed by the West Indies. Andre Russell, Shimron Hetmeyer, Chris Gale scored runs in games 1, 2 and 3 respectively. I have to say, and this has been flagged, I think, again by Masco 101 on Twitter, that Wade, Finch, Marsh, Carey, Enriquez, it's not particularly scary top 5, is it, Dan? I know you wanted to talk about this series a little bit as well.
Oh my word. I struggle to understand the Australian selectors' rationale, to be really honest with you. So you go through that top 5, right? And there's players in there that I wouldn't even want to recruit as a county overseas player, let alone playing international cricket for one of the major nations. And that thing is about as bad as an indictment as you can possibly wish for. And the fact that we've got at Leicestershire a far better player than most of their batters right now playing county cricket in Josh Inglis is...
We shouldn't tell them that.
Well, it's fine. I want him to play. He deserves it. He absolutely deserves to play international cricket. Like, his numbers are far and away better than all of those 6 players, the top 6, Wade, Finch, Marsh, Carey, Henriquez, and Turner from 2019 onwards. You look at the numbers from 2019 onwards, pace and spin, balance, balls per dismissal, boundary percentage, Inglis will beat them. So why isn't he getting picked? I don't know.
Robin Rounder asked this, so let's just ask you straight up. What should Australia do, in your view, to improve their T20 game?
They need to...
New team?
They need to change their selection strategy completely. So they're too reliant on players with high reputations who are older. They're too reliant on dot ball avoiders. They don't have pick players with high boundary percentages, a lot of them. So in that top 6, Finch's boundary percentage is dropping rapidly. Marsh is a very good player against pace, but not spin and strike rate wise. And so coming in at 3 is a bit of a double-edged sword for him. Because if he comes in early, he might be able to get away with quite a few pace overs to get his innings off to a good start. If he comes in after 6 overs, it could be a disaster. Carey is okay, but Inglis is far better as a wicket-keeper batsman. Henriquez has a very poor boundary percentage generally compared.
He's also like 34 now, isn't he, Enriquez?
Yeah, and Turner is similar as well. So I mean, you look at their innings against West Indies in the third match. Finch 30 off 31, Marsh 9 off 12, Henriquez 33 off 29, coming in at 5, and Turner at 6, coming in after 12 overs almost 24 off 22.
Finisher.
Yeah. Then you look at England's third team, Phil Salt, even Zach Crawley. I could tell you, even players who weren't even in the C team, like Joe Clark. These players are so much more.
I do feel like Joe Clark might have been in the C team if there wasn't a current court case for Frey going on.
On ability wise, I'm talking about, obviously. Yeah. These players, Australia haven't developed a T20 team for 2021. Their T20 team is a 2015 team. You can't do this anymore. And then they've got 4 out-and-out bowlers from 8 to 11. Dan Christian, who's, what was he, 37, 38, coming back into their setup. Where's Ben
I couldn't
Cutting?
believe that when I saw he was in there.
Where's Ben Cutting? And Ben Cutting is a more explosive hitter than Christian. There's really not that much to choose from between their bowling ability. So I don't get that. They've got no bowlers who can hit. You could pick Daniel Sams, but you're taking a hit on the bowling compared to, say, like a Meredith or a Stark or a Hazelwood. I don't understand where the long-term thought process is for this selection of their squad, because we all know, we've spoken about this 100 times on this podcast. You have to win the boundary percentage in T20 to win the match. It's almost mandatory. How are you going to do that if you're Australia? Unless Stark, Meredith, Hazelwood, and Zampa bowl incredibly. You're not. You can't.
This is the thing as well. It tends to be going into major tournaments. Teams that have good bowling records tend to do worse than teams that have got good batting records. Batting, for whatever reason, just seems to translate slightly better, or into it has. There's more of a correlation between the teams that hit better going into major tournaments than teams that bowl better. So I think it's being like we're going to rely on our bowlers and try and get 150, which I guess is their plan. I don't even think like the data supports that point of view.
No.
Really.
They hit 13 boundaries in 20 overs against West Indies batting first. And we talked about India women's getting 148 for 4 and it being like a weird scoreline. 141 for 6 of 20. Actually, when there was a wicket on a run out on the last ball, it was really 141 for 5. It's exactly the same. They left 30 runs on the pitch. 13 boundaries in 20 overs. How good have your bowlers got to bowl to defend that?
Very.
And you're playing against the best boundary hitting team in the world.
You'd need 5 Jasprit Bumrahs.
Or maybe one Rashid Kante. But and you have to look at your opponents as well. West Indies in this match, they hit 22 boundaries in 87 balls. So they're hitting about 1 in 4 for boundaries. So they hit 9 more boundaries in Australia in what? 31 less balls.
Yeah.
That's
pretty good.
You've got to understand. So, like, for example, when like a team plays knots in a T20 blast, right? You can't just look at what a pass score will be on that pitch, generally, because everyone knows that knots have got the best hitters. And it's no different for this Australia versus West Indies. So when you're Australia, you've got to dial up par even higher because you know West Indies can chase pretty much anything. You can't just say, oh, hell, the average is at this venue is 150, and if we get that, then we're happy. But you're playing against a team who can chase that with one player playing a world innings, which happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll do it at 15 overs as well. It won't even be close. You won't even be able to rely on putting some of them under pressure near the end because, you got Andre Russell coming in at 6. He can take 3 balls to get the pace of the pitch before doing anything. They're in disarray, Australia. I mean, we did see to get Chris Gale bowling in hat, Max. That wasn't a sentence, but Chris Gale hat. I hope you picked up on that. That was good, wasn't it?
Whoever does it, you love to see it, don't you? And with Chris Gale, all the more excellent, I think.
Yeah. We'll move on. We've got a couple more things. The 100, so they released some rules. Dan, you're able to recuse yourself from this portion of the podcast if you like. Although I am interested to hear, I don't know if you can actually professionally comment on this. Pollard and Dre Russ are out. Do you think that's a hit for that's a bit of a shame, basically, isn't it?
But yeah, it's a shame in terms of like the fact that he's clearly a world-class player, but I'm not going to say it's a negative in terms of one of our rival teams losing.
That's very diplomatically put. The big news really was that they released a tweet thing or an Instagram thing, didn't they? Which people thought was kind of funny, where they decided that overs aren't a thing. Umpires will call 5 and hold up a white card at the end of a set of balls. And then a little bit further down, like 5 bullet points further down, they literally mentioned over rate. Did that make you laugh, Max?
It was the white card that made me laugh. I was just like, why are you
Oh,
holding
mind
up?
the
Why are
white
you holding
card.
up a white card? What new brand of cricket necessitates holding up a white card to make things simpler? But yeah, no, I mean it is quite funny, isn't it? Oh, it's all about this tournament is all about balls. Every ball matters, unlike in normal cricket where some balls just don't count. And yeah, and then just be like, oh, by the way, if you don't bowl quick enough, yeah, it's and they are overs, aren't they? Because they're sets of 5, so they are overs. So just like it's unnecessary. Like I can see what you're trying to do. It's just not really making it simpler, is it? That's the thing. It's like changing things for the sake of changing things, and maybe maybe not that well thought out. But as a tournament, it should be excellent because even with like Pollard and Dre Ross not being there are still some world-class players that will be coming, and we'll be getting to see probably some more of those than we would normally do in the Blast, and you might see a few breakout stars from England on the world stage as well, and maybe just maybe the 100 could overtake the Big Bash as the thing where India go and throw away some interesting contracts to people, because that'd be nice if we could have some competition, wouldn't it, for the Aussies?
Well, I mean, I think the England C team pumping Pakistan will probably raise the profile of a few of those players.
Yeah, they'll get some more PSL contracts, but
maybe. Paul tweeted on this. He wanted a shout out for Stansted Park Cricket Club, who won the inaugural T10 tournament. So well done, Paul. That's very impressive. And also wanted to know, Max, and you can answer this one again, whether these conditions actually make the game easier to access or understand.
You'd have to ask someone who doesn't like cricket or thinks that cricket is overly complicated. I think I'm not going to be able to give you a fair opinion on this because I think it's absolute nonsense, because I don't see why cricket as it is too complicated, and I don't see how the changes that they've implemented make it less complicated. Like, what's the difference between calling 5 and calling over? Why are you holding up a white card? Why have you suddenly decided that if a batsman gets caught and they cross, they have to go back? It's like it's changing things that I don't think are actually going to improve the experience of getting to know cricket. So from my point of view, I don't think so. But I know cricket and I like cricket as it is, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. I'd say, yeah, fine. Ask someone who's getting into the. If it does get people into the 100 and they think that this makes it easier to follow, then I guess that's the evidence you need, isn't it?
Well, that is the thing. On that point, I've said I think pretty much the whole time through, I just like it to be a T20 tournament.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think. And if you want to shorten it, make it T15 if you have to.
2015. That would be really harsh on the team batting second, Max.
You could have a time game. You could bat out the
chase.
last 2 overs.
I on that point about it being easy to access, I am going to the opening game with my girlfriend and her niece, who haven't ever been to a cricket match before. At least in terms of it being like, if it's the worst case scenario, it's over in 2 hours 15 minutes or something. It's sold quite well on that front. We'll continue to watch. We are going to do a preview show that's coming up at some point soon. The last thing we want to talk about today is Ireland beating South Africa. Dan, did you see this coming?
I rate Ireland probably as one of the better sort of lower profile teams. They're not obviously an associate team anymore, but they're kind of around the ilk. Whether I thought they'd beat South Africa is another matter entirely. The problem is, we're talking about 2015 or 2015 kind of teams. That's South Africa too. They don't have the batting intent, and 290 chase without intent is a difficult proposition. Ireland, obviously, fair play to them. They're quite conservative at the start, and then teed off right at the back end to put about 100 on off the last 8 or 9 overs. And South Africa, they were never really in the hunt, but you kind of thought, oh, they're going to pull it out of the bag somehow. Something's going to happen to avoid the shock. But I actually think that even with the win for Ireland, they could have even done it a bit better. So, for example, Yanniman Milan got 84 for South Africa. Now, it's not a massive secret among the analyst community that he struggles against slow left-arm bowling. But it took Ireland 20 overs to bring their slow left-arm Dockrell on. Maybe if they'd have opened with him, it would have been even better. And it's interesting because I think that South Africa, they weren't exposed for matchups in the recent series against West Indies. And I think that was a big factor as to why they won that series. I think West Indies got the matchups really wrong. And again, they're kind of getting away with that a little bit in terms of people aren't really working out their weaknesses. If I'm an opposition team against South Africa, say I'm at home, and I've got the opposite. Just say I'm England, for example, and we're at home against South Africa. I'm preparing ranked turners and bowling and picking as many spinners as possible. You can't lose because their players have poor strike rates against spin.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. Max, it is quite historic. It is quite historic for Ireland, though, isn't it?
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant for Ireland. Yeah, because they've been sort of on the cusp, haven't they, of like of being a team that can challenge. They've beaten England before. We've seen some of the and we've seen some of their players on the domestic circuit. We've seen like Paul Sterling, for example. We know all about him. He's an excellent player. And they've been threatening to be good for a little while, and often seem to just come up a bit short. So I think this could be a good point for them to kick on. And it's part of the World Cup, World Series ODI thing where you get some points and qualify for the World Cup. So that's a great start in that for them. And I think it'd be brilliant for Ireland. And I think something that they should really genuinely aim for is to qualify through that, because they've got good players. They could do it.
Yeah, so that win actually, it's a good point, Max. That puts them back into automatic qualification now, because all the teams have played like different amounts of games, which has been exacerbated by the whole pandemic situation. Ireland are like way ahead of some of their direct rivals for qualification in terms of matches played, but they're currently fifth. If they can take another win against South Africa, and then they go into a series against Zimbabwe, and if they can, probably sweep Zimbabwe, then automatic qualification becomes something that actually I think could be attainable for this side, particularly if you think that like Sri Lanka aren't going to be causing anyone any trouble, are they? On that front.
Poor old Sri Lanka. Ireland are already over 2 wins clear of Sri Lanka from the games in hand of Sri Lanka have got.
South Africa, they've got 1 win from their 5 matches. You'd think they probably will recover. Afghanistan, they've won 3 out of 3, but you'd think that as they play some of the bigger teams, that record will correct itself. I don't know what they'll need to win, or how many they'll need to win Ireland to get an automatic qualification berth. But I would probably expect it to be at least all those matches against Zimbabwe. But they put themselves in a great position. They're back in that now. And that's good. I think that's everything for this week's episode of the Cricket Pod. So just a quick reminder, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the Cricket Pod. You should leave us a comment, give us a like, subscribe, head over to patreon.com/the Cricket Pod and join, and we'll read your name out on our next show on our Roll of Honor. And we will make a Roll of Honor and we'll put you on the credits, and it will be fantastic. Or you could get a hat. You can get a hat. And who doesn't want a hat? Anything else that we've missed in the world of cricket this week? Ashwin got 5 wickets today. That's it.
Yep, Ashwin was bad and then Ashwin was good again.
Yeah. Great. Dan, do you want to let people know where they can find you specifically?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, at SA Advantage on Twitter.
Good. We're going to head off. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. We will be back next week. We'll probably have to do that 100 preview, I think, won't we? So we'll be back, I think, with that next week. Bye-bye.